All right. So this is going to be probably a little bit more low key than what you've experienced earlier. And so we're going to start off with a little introduction. I'll introduce myself and my colleagues here will introduce themselves. And then kind of maybe each of us as we introduce ourselves, talk a little bit about, our involvement with multi-generational language learning. So we'll do that so you know where we're coming from. Shoji Sam Alexander Oji, Kuchaje, Kutsanihli Tananguichi, UAF and Chikuchit the Gol in, the Kinchik Goltan, Shiki Tik, Shi, Shad, we could not in Sul A. My name is Sam Alexander. I'm originally from Fort Yukon. That's where I grew up. And I work here at the university and I'm one of the Gwich'in language instructors. Gwich'in is not my first language. And so I know we had talked about, we'd already talked or heard downstairs about, language transmission and shame and that kind of thing. And I really appreciate the words of the speakers about, acknowledging it, but also moving forward and some of the challenges that you face. And I know Casey had mentioned he speaks with family members and sometimes they don't speak back to him. And the challenges that we have in having multi-generational language learning occur. My own father is a first language speaker of Gwich'in, and it took probably about 4 years of me speaking to him in the language before he would speak back to me. And it was Jason was with me when he did, and I used to I'd bother my father and I'd ask him things in Gwich'in and then he would respond in English. And then one day he just sat down by us and he talked for 2 hours straight. and he's a really good speaker. So some of the stuff are like way over our heads as I'm a second language learner. But within my own family, I teach my children our language. And so my wife does as well. And so we use it in the home. And, I think one of the things that, well, I'll get into that here in a second, but, it can be done. It is being done. And it's actually not as hard as you might think it is in terms of multi-generational language learning. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second. So, Chidejo, you're up.
Okay. Or Merrifield's Sam Vitzi. My name. Okay. Shoji Jason Harris, Oji, Chicago Watson, Ishliga, Tanangwichi, Shichan University, Guan. University Guan, Gwich'in, Gual'in. My name is Jason Harris. I'm from Chicago originally. I've been here for almost 10 years. I also work at the university. I work with Sam, research on the Gwich'in language, and how I fall into multi-generational language learning as well. I hang out with Sam and talk Gwich'in with his kids when I can. Obviously, I'm not as good. And in all the interaction with elders, and as the early panelists had brought up, and Sam in the video, well, I'm totally an outsider, but people have welcomed me in to learn the language. I'm trying to be genuine, and that's that. Masi.
Oyana huinga yuhtun angasawa angayuqayrut kahkahwa kakfagalra Calvin Coolidge ana galu alutak Sophie Coolidge agulhok. My name is Sally Samson, and I work at the Kuskokwim campus in Bethel. And before I was employed there, I was a immersion classroom teacher for 19 years in Bethel. So, and then growing up, we've heard several people talk about the very beginning when Yuhtun or our languages were introduced in the school. I was one of those kindergarten students that was first taught in Yuhtun from kindergarten through 2nd grade. And then my brother, during that time, He was, I think he was one of the students here, the first students that was working on our language and orthography, or grammar and orthography. And then while he was here, my father, he was a lay pastor for the Moravian Church. He and another pastor were sent here, and they were taught that orthography. And stories I heard from him about that was that he was very excited about, teaching little children how to read and write in Yuhtun. And his vision was to, translate all the church materials into our language so that little children, when they go into the church, will have material that they can read in church. So he was very excited about that. Doi Kuyang, I thank you.
Okay, so, multi-generational language learning for, before, the coming of Western society, it was just daily life, There was multi-generational learning that occurred nonstop, and obviously there was a massive interruption to that. And so the question is, how do we restart that multi-generational language learning? How do we kickstart it? You could read a lot of books about it, and we actually have some resources that you could look at, and we'll pass that out here, some language learning resources that can get you started in the right direction. But when you're thinking about learning a language, it's such a large world. It's such a large world. And so where do you begin? Where do you begin when you're going to learn and use your language with your family? And so one thing that can be done is to think about, what is it that you say to your children, to your grandchildren, to your friends, to your siblings, whomever, or to your parents, kind of on a daily basis? We tend to talk about the same things. What did you do yesterday? I watched TV. I was watching Netflix or whatever it is, Disney. So I watched this show. Are you hungry? Did you eat? You need to eat. Like I have 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl, and my oldest son is 4. And every single day, it's the same conversation. As you would have kids, that you need to get up, brush your teeth, get your clothes on, go out the door, whatever it may be, stop hitting your brother. So every day we say these things. And so what I would like to do is we're going to take a few minutes, and you're going to work with somebody that's sitting next to you, and you're going to come up with the 10 most frequent things that you say, and it could be to whoever you speak with the most. So if you speak with you're married, you speak with your spouse the most, or if you're spending a lot of time with young kids or with your siblings, whomever it is, what are the 10 most frequent things that you say to them? So I want you to do this right now. You're going to move next to your friends and you're going to talk about it. We're going to give you 5 minutes because we're all teachers up here. And we like to boss people around. So get next to people, 5 minutes, and I want you to come up with the 10 most frequently said things you use in your life. All right. There are no strangers here. We're all friends. Get close to each other. Okay. I heard a lot of good discussion out there. People are, a small group said, well, we use a lot of curse words. Which I said, you don't think we talk like that in our language? You should hear the things people say. So I think it's important to recognize all forms of communication. You know, it is a challenge if you take a look at some of our material, because you can only see like the good stuff written in there, not the real dirty stuff, but people talk that way. So let's be adults here. All right, so that's okay. Okay, you got your 10 things. And so the question then is, how do we go about, how do we go about sharing that with our kids or with somebody else in a way that's going to be accessible to them to learning it? And so what do we do? And so Jason and I have never studied, and I'm going to say this wrong, I apologize. Jungtun, is that what you said? Juchtun. I've never studied other than what Walkie tells me. And so we're going to use a methodology called told physical response. And Sally's going to tell us what that is. And then she's going to walk us through a demonstration. Jason and I are her clients here.
She said they're babies. But as language teachers, we all know, we all use TPR. And that's especially in the immersion program where we teach the little children understanding first, comprehending what we're saying. And TPR works well with that. And once they learn to understand, we expect them to, we teach them how to respond. And then after that, we expect them to respond in Yuhtun. So we'll kind of introduce that, how that works. Okay?
Probably don't use that. Just do whatever you want. Oh, we'll sit here. We're ready.
Okay, Gidaki. Nang shoot. Nang to. Ini ko pastuk. 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 Ya, pastuk. Kidik pastuk. Asugu.
Jason said he wanted to dance a little bit more, but I said no. Okay, so that is one way to do, kids, they're watching you. And so we, as you saw us, we're watching and we're just really trying to see what she's doing before we can really understand what she's saying or even the pronunciation, that's really part of learning. And your kids and whoever you're speaking with, they're going to do that too. Like my little son, if he wants help, he's supposed to say "Shitsinya." Well, it's kind of a lot for him to say when he's like 2. And so you just say "nah." And that's it. He'd say "nah," and I knew what he meant. And then as he got a little bit older, he said "Tsinya." And now he's 4 and he could say "Shitsinya." And so kind of our expectations of what people can say, we need to kind of manage that. But with this methodology and with a lot of different methodologies, ultimately for multi-generational language learning is really replacing those common things that we say every day and using our language to do that. Because that's where that volume of language comes in. Because we do say a lot of the same things. You need to eat your food, get dressed, especially when you're talking to kids, a lot of commands. But, if you're talking to your friends, one of the things we're doing in our Good Chin class is like, what are you doing? What are you doing today? What did you do yesterday? And then people will say, oh, I went to the store, I bought shoes or whatever they're doing, that high frequency piece is really the connection we need in order to ensure that we're using our language. And so high frequency stuff of things that we talk about all the time and replacing, the English that we're using is a way. We're not saying you got to be fluent overnight or you can only speak in an immersive setting. It's just slowly chipping away and using these terms and these phrases with your family, friends, neighbors, whomever. And that's going to be, the usage of the language. And pretty soon it's not even about using the language. It's how you communicate with them at some point. That's it. So I think that's all I have. Do you guys have any closing thoughts? Anything?
So what did you get to?
Oh, I took it off because I had already done it. Past tense, completed, or is it present tense? I had done it. Ah. I heard the I ending. I was like, oh, that's the I. Because it's different for us in which, and so I was like, this I must be right at the very end. That's cool. So we have some resources. Actually, we have time. We have a few minutes for questions. So if anybody has questions, go ahead and raise your hand and we'll do our best to answer them. Anything, any questions? We got a question right here. TPR.
Oh, yeah, I was, when I was teaching at the immersion school, that's where I learned it first. Yeah.
There's and if you want to come up ask her afterwards and ask us about TPR, we could talk about that, and TPRS, which is a little bit different. We actually use that in the Gwitch in classroom. We use the teaching proficiency through reading and storytelling in the Gwitch in classroom here at UAF. We had another question in the back. Total physical response, TPR. It was developed by Dr. James Asher, and so that's James Asher developed that, and then TPRS was developed by a guy named Blaine Ray. And so that's those are two methodologies, and they coincide and they work together as well, pretty well. Other questions? Yes, in the back. If you're not imparting pronunciation, it's going to be hard to understand your students understand one another, or for them to understand you. Are there any insights that you guys have to that? Yeah, well, one thing that we do, so when we're teaching, at least in at the university here, whenever a student, so we're mindful of not correcting students per se on their pronunciation, because we don't want them to feel like they're not saying it right, or we know if we know what they're really trying to say. Like my son, he says "nya," I know I'm gonna be like, hold up, son, this shit's in ya. Why don't you try that again? He's 2 years old. He's like, okay, so your students are the same way. But what we do is if I actually know what they're saying, I'm like, exactly, I don't say exactly, I'm like, all right, shit's in ya. And I repeat it back to them, whatever they're saying to me. So like in the class, we were talking about going to Fred Meyer's. And so they're like, Fred Meyer's, Fred Meyer's, what's isha? And I was like, Fred Meyer's, what's isha? Fred Meyer's, what's inha? Fred Meyer's, what's inha? Shi Chun, Fred Meyer's, what's isha? And so we repeat back everything they say in the proper way, but it's never meant as, and the students know this, it's never meant as like a correction of what they're saying. If he said it, so my nephew's here, if he said it exactly correct, I would repeat it back to him anyways. If he said it wrong, I'd repeat it back to him anyways. Regardless of how they say it, we always repeat it back, so they're always on the same level. They themselves will notice whether or not they're mispronouncing something. They're going to notice it and they're going to adapt. It just gives them that opportunity to do that. So good question. Yes. Oh.
Just want to say, again, this is one of many methods. And what I really like about their presentation is that it's always positive. Because we need to keep in mind that the souls or the spirits of these learners is very, very fragile. And so even when they make mistakes, we say, Quincy, we say, good job, good job, good job, good job. And like I say in my classroom, this is the best place to make all your mistakes. Because we're fixing together. It's the safest place to make the mistakes, because we're fixing together. And so, it's about Quincy all the time, not each other.
Like Sally had said, we're babies up here because we're not, and it's and as a language learner, it's knowing that I don't know anything. So of course want that support, but we're babies learning. So just keep in mind that they're gonna, you gotta hold their hands through it, and not expect too much, I think, because otherwise it's discouraging and we want to eliminate that. That's all I have to say.
Akute. I think akute. The boss said we're done, so we're done.
Thank you all. Oh my God, that's so loud. Thank you all. Now we're going to invite John DeCandelero from the Alaska Native Language Archives to come up and give another 30-minute presentation on how to use the archives. Right here.
Read my notes a little more subtly.
Hello. Okay, you're good.
Okay, cool. Thanks.